Amita is sharing a screen, and I'm sharing a link of this session. Like I'm sharing your attendance sheet on the WhatsApp group. As of now, I can see here there are 54 check-ins, and uh, there are 59 people in this meeting. So there are still around 5 people who have not joined virtually. So what you have to do, I'm sharing the link. And trust me, guys, this is going to be one of the best session organized till now by any club regarding this. And I'm going to interact with you all in this session. Okay, this is a link. If you have joined through the Google Meet link, जिसका link start होता है meet.google.com. So click on this link and join back. All right. Now coming to the questions like, is there any goodies? Is there any perks that you are going to receive? तो इस पे आ जाते हैं जो सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट चीज़ है पढ़ते तो बाद में रहेंगे Amita, can you just refresh the page and can you please okay cool no problem thanks all right so coming to the agenda like are we going to get any goodies is there any prerequisite so folks there is no prerequisite for this entire session we have already shared a WhatsApp group link if you are not in the WhatsApp group link join the WhatsApp group. Okay, let's wait for just 2 more minutes because I see that many students have just left to join from the correct link. In the meantime, if anybody want to interact or if anybody want to introduce themselves, they can. किसी को कुछ नहीं बोलना है कोई नहीं. Okay, this is the WhatsApp group link. You can join the WhatsApp group of this session from here itself. चलो पहली चीज I hope I'm audible and let's start. So first of yeah, Akshat, yeah, please go ahead.
हेलो सर मैं दूसरी कॉलेज से ये इवेंट को ज्वाइन कर सकता हूँ ओके थैंक यू
Okay, so coming to the important information, first of all, this series is going to be of 3 weeks plus one extra session. In these 3 weeks, in first session, we are going to cover the HTML. In the second session, we are going to cover up the advanced HTML. And then in the third session, we are going to cover CSS. In the fourth session, we are going to cover the advanced CSS. In the fifth session, we are going to cover JavaScript. And in the sixth session, we are going to cover some framework related to JavaScript. After that, after that, we are going to cover, there will be a specific session which will be led by Akash. He will be telling you how you can deploy your project, whatever the project you have learned, whatever the web development you will learn from this session, how you can deploy the same on the Google Cloud. We will be showing you live how you can deploy your entire project on Google Cloud. Along with that, if possible, we will also show you like how you can use the cPanel or any other hosting platform where you can deploy your project. So for this entire program, you are not going to get any kind of goodies. You are going to get a certificate of completion, and a certificate of excellence will also be given if you will able to make a complete project by your own, not copied by GitHub, because we are going to open each and every single file and we are going to interview properly that how you have written, what the code it is. Cool?
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, fine. So this is the entire hierarchy of this program. Like we are going to cover this in such manner, and this program is entirely going to led by Aayush Juyal. So if you are from Sharda University, I want to tell something about Aayush. He is one of the most brilliant student from third year. He is the executive in Technova, and he's the person behind the Technova website. And adding on more, I would also like to tell you that there was a collaboration between the Z Media and Sharda University. So he was the person who has built a particular website regarding the same also. So it is just a small introduction about him. So two things are clear. Your attendance is mandatory, not mandatory like college, but yeah, if you will not attend the sessions, it's all up to you. You can attend according to your needs, but at the end of the session, there will be two criteria for getting the certificate. First criteria will be if you have around 80% attendance, then we will be giving you the certificates. If your attendance is low, then at least you have to submit a project, and that project will be, we will assess that particular project. That project will be assessed specifically by Ayush, Akash, Ujjwal, and other folks of the team. They will be assessing your project, and there will be a proper interview where you have to explain what you have written. It's not like that you have copied some project from GitHub and you will be getting the certificate of completion. So this is how this program is going to be. We will be covering each session on Saturday and Sunday from and we have already we have already scheduled the event on the event platform. If you are interested, just you have to visit GDSC Sharda University webpage or simply search on Google GDSC Sharda University, and there the events are lined up, and we have only kept 100 seats per event, and we are not going to extend it because we don't want much crowd. We want quality people who are interested in learning. So make sure to register all of them as per your interest. In the group, we will be sharing the information regarding what are the session plan and how things are going to be. Okay, so for the session of Akash, as this is an optional session, I want to know how many of you are interested on deploying your projects on Google Cloud. Just raise your hands. Out of 72, how many people are interested? 21, 25, 33, 7, 42. Okay, I'm also interested because I also want to learn more. Very much excited. Cool. So, all right. So, I'm assuming around 40 people are interested out of 70. Like, okay. Okay, you can down your hands. And I recommend if you can switch on your camera, if you are comfortable, you can switch on your cameras. That will be completely okay. Please join the WhatsApp group. Discuss only regarding this web campaign. Don't discuss anything else. Any kind of marketing activities is strictly prohibited. And yeah, Shushma, please go ahead. Okay, no problem. All right, folks. So we are just going to start. Over to you, Ayush. Thank you. Just okay. Just give me a second, Ayush. Let me just share the uh, attendance sheet in the group. If anyone's like, if the attendance of any particular guy is not marked on that particular attendance sheet, please let me know so that we can mark. Right now, we have 70 students who have been checked in. Uh, for now, we have 72 people who have checked in. So I'm downloading the attendance sheet and just sharing it in the WhatsApp group. Check it out at WhatsApp group, and then we will be starting with the session. From now on, what I'm assuming that you all will be comfortable with the uh, platform of joining the same with the community link. So please join through the community link so that we can easily start with the session without this attendance procedure. And just an add-on, anyone? Okay, if anybody is an international student, just raise your hand. Who is not able to understand Hindi? If anybody is not able to understand Hindi, okay, okay, all right, thanks. Uh, just give me a couple of minutes, folks. There is some dispense in the data itself.
Good evening, Ria.
Yeah, very good evening. Very good evening. Just give me a second. I'm just checking with the data. All right, so I'm just sharing the sheet. Uh, Sorry for this long delay. I don't know why the platform is not working, but just few more minutes. From next time onwards, we will be taking care of this. Sincere apologies for now. Well, just raise your hands. How many of you are participating in this Technovation Hackathon? Nice. Actually, you know what? I just got to download the CSV, but I have to clear some data. That's why it is taking some time. Mm, They're done. Okay, Ayush, just start with the session. I will be sharing the list in a while. Sorry for the disturbance. Link for the group is there in the yeah. Okay, Ayush, over to you. Please start with the session. Sorry for the disturbance.
Hello guys. Hope you are well. I hope my screen is visible. I just want to actually thank you all for joining this session. Uh, I feel like this skill that you're going to be learning over the next few, weeks, it's going to be very beneficial for you guys. Even as Harshit mentioned, the fifth Technovation Hackathon is coming, and I feel like being able to learn this skill is going to be very beneficial because you'll be able to build projects that you can put on your resume, and you can use this skill in order to participate in hackathon and even win it. So I just want you guys to be excited about it, be enthusiastic about it. And yeah, because in this field, personally, I'm not that a creative person, but I know a lot of you guys would be creative minded. So in this field you can be creative with the tools that we're going to be learning. And I also just want to introduce, like, I just want to show some of my work that I've done. So as Harshit said, I've designed the Technova website, so you can see this is the website that I've designed for Technova. So I know it's not, it's not the most creative website, and you guys will be able to design way more creative websites after you learn the necessary tools. I've also designed like calculators using just JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. And yeah, I just want you guys to be enjoy the journey while you can, and also apply what you have learned in these sessions or to your projects. So yeah, let's just get started actually. So before we actually get into the coding part, the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, let's kind of focus on why we need those, right? Why do we need HTML, CSS, JavaScript? Why do we need these programming languages or these design languages? So we need to be able to understand how websites work, what happens when you type in google.com, right? So we need to be able to understand that. So you agree that whenever you open any browser, right? So when you open, let's say Google Chrome, Firefox, you will, type in some website's name, right? So you may type sharda.ac.in, whatever. You may type twitter.com, google.com. So we need to be able to understand what goes on behind the scenes because it's important to us why we need all these programming languages like CSS, JavaScript, HTML. So let me just divert away from internet, right? Let's take an example, right? So when you go to any shop, you want to buy something, right? So there are two people, there's an interaction that takes place, right, between two people. One is yourself because you are wanting to buy something, right? You want to buy something. And there's another who's the shopkeeper. He wishes to sell something, right? So in this case, you are the client because you want to get something from the shopkeeper. You want some resources. Okay, those resources could be anything, but you want something from that shopkeeper. So in this case, you're the client. Okay, now going back to the internet, the client for you, your device is going to be the client. Why? Because it's requesting for some resources. You are requesting to look for some website, right? When you type google.com, your device becomes a client because you want to visit a website. And now, in order to visit that website, you have to basically request some resources. Now, you may be wondering what those resources are. I will tell you in the next slide. But right now, all you have to understand, your device is a client, and you are basically requesting some resources in order to, visit a website. Now, there is something called the ISP, a Internet Service Provider. Now, don't go into too much detail into understanding what this is, but basically these are the people that you pay to access the internet. So what happens is when you type in the website's name, that information gets sent to the ISP. Now, what the ISP does is basically it relays that information, so the website name, to the DNS, the Domain Name System Server. The DNS is basically like a telephone book. If you've seen, like, in that basically there is information consisting of someone's name and their telephone number. Now, if you convert that into internet terminology, it's basically saying that each website will be associated with its IP address. If you have seen, like, I'll show you like what IP addresses look like if you have seen these numbers like 192.168.0.1, like something like that, even if you've seen 255 dot something like that, these are your IP addresses. So IP addresses are basically like, these are the unique addresses that are used to identify each website over the internet, right? These are basically 32-bit IP address. And so going on to the next slide. So once you have basically used an IP address, that IP address will be used to locate where Google is located. That's what it's basically doing, where Google is located. Now, if you remember a few minutes back, I basically took the example of the shop, right? There was interaction between the shopkeeper and yourself. Now, in that scenario, I said that you are the client. And now I'm going to tell you that the shopkeeper in this is the server, because he wants to serve some information. He wants to give you some resources. So when we get the IP address of Google or Facebook or whatever, we have successfully located where it's located in the server, right? So once we basically get the location of whatever website, the server is basically able to serve those resources back to the client. So it's like, you will often hear this term client server relationship, guys. Client server relationship. client requests for some resources, the server will serve those resources back to the client. Now, I said one slide ago, what are those resources? Now, those resources are these three files: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. These are the three files that are needed to load any website, right? Now, you may be wondering, like, what are these files? Like, what is the purpose of each and every single file, right? So starting off with HTML. Now let's take another example. If you are building any house, you know that in order to build a house, I need what? I need walls, I need a roof, I need doors, right? I need the material like, cement, bricks, all that. So converting that into, web terminology, we're basically saying that we are basically defining the body of our website, right? We are basically defining the underlying structure of our website. So, when you visit any website, if you see the content, like all the text, if you see the headings, if you see the buttons, if you see the checkboxes, radio buttons, all of this gets defined in the HTML. Now, any website needs HTML, right? You may have a website without CSS and JavaScript, but a website needs HTML for it to function, right? Now, moving on to CSS, I will show you what a website looks like, how websites differ with CSS and without CSS. So this is the Technova web page. I hope you can see that this is the Technova web page. This is how it looks like with HTML and with CSS and with JavaScript enabled, right? Now, when I disable the CSS, look how the website looks like, right? Look how the website, when I disable the CSS. This is how the website looks like when I've disabled the CSS. You can see how different it is as compared to a website that does have CSS. So this is a website in which the CSS is disabled, right? You can see all it has is content. The background color has been reduced, there's no styling, and this is the website with CSS. You can see it looks way more attractive, right? So going back to the slide, you can understand what the purpose of CSS is, right? The CSS is basically acting as a design language, right? It's basically like, going back to the house example, you have built your house, but now you want to paint it, right? You want to basically able to make it look more attractive. Back in the 1980s, 1990s, that's how websites were built. They were not built using CSS. If you type in Google, like, old websites, they were just built using HTML, and that's it. Nowadays, websites have gotten so much more attractive through the help of CSS. And people consider that HTML and CSS as kind of design languages, right? Where JavaScript is more of a programming language, right? And JavaScript is basically where you're kind of applying logic, you're applying functionality, right? Like, for example, like, again, going back to the house example, you have your house, you have painted it, you have styled it, but you don't have anything within it that functions. You don't have water, you don't have electricity. So that's the point of JavaScript. Like, let me show you example, like live example of JavaScript, or where JavaScript gets used. Like, when I go to the Technova web page, you see this typing effect that's happening. That's due to JavaScript. When I go down, you see these numbers increasing. This is also due to JavaScript. The slider that's here, that's also implemented because of JavaScript. So JavaScript is basically acting as, like, it is a programming language, right? And it is one of the most popular programming language. In 2022, 78% of developers use JavaScript as their primary programming language. And the reason is because it's a scripting language, and people are basically it's primarily used for development, right? And it's very easy to, the syntax is, if you have learned Python, JavaScript is very similar to, Python. And I don't get confused between JavaScript and Java. They're nothing alike. JavaScript only got the name Java because in 1995, Java, the programming language, was very popular, so that's why they took the name JavaScript. So yeah, this was all about how the internet works, right? So I hope you understood why we actually need HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So let's actually get into the more fun part of coding. So I hope you can see that I have basically a IDE, Visual Studio Code. So I'm pretty sure a lot of people have already downloaded it. If you don't, I actually have resources here. And yeah, you can basically download Visual Studio Code from here. I'll actually share it. in the chat.
Okay, so guys, if you have any confusion for till now, you can unmute yourself and ask the queries. If everything is good, just give a thumbs up. Okay, I'm assuming that everything is all right. Okay, Ayush, please continue. Thanks.
Yeah, so this is an IDE Visual Studio Code. You can download it, and I've shared the link in the chat. So this IDE is what we'll be using to implement HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So yeah, so I have a directory here, source code, and within this, I'm going to be writing my HTML. Now, it's important to understand that all HTML files are have an extension of .html, right? Dot. I'll show you. Uh, Now you will be wondering why I actually named my file index.html. You can say, oh, why couldn't I have named it something else, right? Can I name my file something else rather than index.html? Well, you can name your file something else, right? You can name it anything you want. But if you are designing your home page, right, which you usually start off with, you need to name the file in which you're designing your home page index.html, because whenever you visit any website, the browser will search for the file index.html, and it will load that as the home page. Let me show you an example. You can see that when I go to Technova and I refresh it, you can see index.html. That means that the browser is looking for the file index.html, and that's the home page that it's going to load, right? So if you don't define index.html, there may be some confusion by the browser on which page to load, because there's no default page that has been defined as the home page. So it's important that when you're designing your home page, that has to be the name of that file has to be index.html. After that, the rest of the HTML files names can be whatever you want. Right. Now let's get into writing our first HTML code. Now, if you have done any programming language, and I hope you have, there are several concepts in the programming language like loops, variables, and all that. In HTML, there are basically two concepts that you have to understand. It's a very simple thing. There's no logic in HTML. You just have to remember two things. One is that HTML is consisting of tags, right? Tags are basically the elements that you see on any page, like buttons, checkboxes, all that. And the next one is attributes. Every tag has some attributes associated with it, right? Attributes are basically like the properties that are defined with each element. I will show you an example uh, in a few minutes, but each tag is basically defined like this. I'll show you the syntax of a tag. You write angular braces, and then you write the tag name. Now watch what Visual Studio Code does here. I'm basically gonna type the angular braces, and watch what Visual Studio Code does here. It auto completes it, and that's a really good thing about Visual Studio Code, that it auto completes most of your code. So you know what, you don't even have to write a lot of it actually. So this is a tag name. This is the tag name that comes in, and within this you basically write some content, right? And this is a closing tag, right? So this is referred to as an opening tag. This is referred to as a closing tag, and within this comes your content. There is another type of tag which is a self-closing tag. A self-closing tag is basically a tag in which you don't have to use a closing tag. It's these other types of tags that are referred to as self-closing tags. Okay, I'll show you with an example where I'll actually write the HTML. But these are the two types of tags that you will encounter in HTML. A tag in which you have to explicitly define that you have to close it, and a tag in which you don't have to explicitly define. And this is the syntax, right? Yeah, so that's kind of the syntax of HTML. Now, how do we start writing our HTML? So whenever you know, you have created your HTML file, the first thing that you want to write is Angular braces, HTML, Angular braces. Now, all your code comes within these HTML braces, right? Now, within HTML, you have two things. You have a body and you have a head. So let me just define that. You have a head, sorry, you have a head and you have a body. Now the head is basically, I'll show you what a head is. The head is basically all the information that's kind of here and all the external information. If you can see, it says Technical Society Home, right? This title gets defined within the head. I'll define it. So title, so I'll give it first website, right? So this is the title, and I'll show you the live example source code. If you want to basically see how your website looks like, just go to the index file that you created and just double click, and you can see here, right? First website, and that was the title that I gave, right? You also give external information like this.
Ayush, you have not closed the head tag.
Oh yeah, right.
Still वो close नहीं हुआ.
Sorry guys. So my bad, I didn't close it. So as I was saying, you can write the title. You can write the title. So I gave it what, first website name, and the additional information that I was writing was meta charset UTF-8. So this information is not important. Basically, it's basically defines what characters you require within, what characters you can use within your website. Let me show you an example. Like, these are the character lists that are basically defined within UTF-8, right? So again, it's not important. You don't have to alter anything within this. Is just some additional information that you have to add within the HTML, right? And the code, that the main code that comes will come within the body, right? Now you may be wondering, like, do I have to repeat all of this again and again? Like every time I have to write a HTML file, do I have to write all these 11 pieces of code? Well, no. Visual Studio Code actually has a smarter way, so I'm just gonna delete this. And what you can do is actually write Shift 1. So once you do that, it will auto-complete most of the work for you. You can see that whatever we have written before, all of it is basically the same thing. It adds additional information, and honestly, most of it is something that you really don't have to care about. Like this information, personally, I have never really bothered to look at. The most, this is kind of important because it defines the title of your web page, right? So let me just, first website. So yeah, so this is what we have done. You can see it's, when you refresh it, first website again. So yeah, so let's start writing some more HTML code. We'll start with some of the headings, right? So there are basically six types of headings. So let me just write headings. And if you want to comment out anything in HTML, just write, do control slash. You can basically comment control slash, and you'll be able to comment out your code. So in HTML, basically there are six types of headings. I'll show you. There's basically H1, which is basically the first heading, and then H2, second heading, right? So it goes up to, sorry, H3, third heading, right? So if I go back here, you can see that, yeah, first heading, so this refers to your H1, right? So this refers to H2, H3. So you can see that when I go down in numbers, so when I go up in numbers, like from H1, H2, H3, the font size is getting smaller. So H1 is kind of considered as the most important heading, right? H2 is the second most, H3 is the third most, H4 is the fourth most, so forth. So this goes up till H6. I'll show you H6. You can see how small H6 is as compared to H1, H2, and H3, right? So now a lot of people ask like, oh, which one should I use when? Like when should I use H1, H2, H3? It's completely dependent on the design, right? Like if I go to the techno website, like here I used an H1 here because I kind of wanted to create, I wanted people to basically see Technova first, right? I want people to see this particular text first. But if you go down here, I kind of used an H3 here. So, when you start practicing, you will get to learn like, oh, I will use H3 here, I will use H2 here, H1 here. So that will kind of come with practice. But right now, I've just kind of given you a brief about, oh, the different types of headings. So another, like similar to headings, we basically have paragraphs. So it is basically defined by the P element, and within this you can type basically a paragraph. So if you see here, this right here was a paragraph element that I used, and sometimes what actually happens is, when you are designing a website, like when I was designing this website, I didn't have the content for it, so this I didn't have. So what I ran into some problems like, oh, like if I didn't have this piece of content, and the problem was like, oh, how do I build the entire website and see how this piece of page, this entire page looks without the content. So a neat technique that you can use in Visual Studio Code is basically type lorem and just click enter. And let me give you actually a better view of this. So you can see it basically auto completes with some random text, right? So if you want like text, like you want some paragraphs with some specific character length, so you can type lorem 50. I want 50 characters, right? So it will be 50 characters. I want 100 characters. So it becomes 100 characters. So it's just a neat technique for you to, when designing websites. So if I refresh this, you can see 100 characters are right here and then, right? So that's kind of all about the paragraph element. Let's move on to another tag, which is the list items. List items. In list items, basically, there are two types of lists, right? There is a ordered list. There's an ordered list, and there is a. Let me just discuss ordered list first. So ordered list is basically defined by OL, the OL tag. And within this, you basically have list items. So you have li, there's a tag called li, and within this, you basically type in your whatever list. Like let's say you want to write a list of programming languages that you know. So like C++, Python, something like this. This is an ordered list. Now, if I go back to here, my web page, I'll refresh it. You can see my ordered list. It's one, two, and now I will write unordered list. So you will see the difference pretty soon. So unordered list is actually defined by UL, right? UL. So remember, ordered list defined by OL, unordered list is defined by UL, right? So similarly, you will type in li, the list items. I will write some more JavaScript, Go, something like that. Now watch the difference between these two. Unordered list won't be numbered, it will be bullet pointed. You can see it won't be numbered, it will be bullet pointed. So that's kind of the difference between an ordered list and an unordered list, right? One will be numbered, the other won't be. Now let's move on to something a bit more tricky that beginners, find it difficult. Let's talk about images, right? The reason I say it's kind of tricky is because it can be difficult to load in an image. I'll show you why that is. So I've kind of shown you the image tag already. It's a self-closing tag, right? Now a few minutes ago I talked about something called attributes, right? And an image tag basically takes in the attributes are basically defined within each HTML tag, right? Within each HTML element. The image tag basically takes in a mandatory attribute, which is basically source, defining where that image is located, right? You basically need to specify the location of the image within the source, within the source attribute. right? So I have an image here, right, within the resources. You can see image one. I'm going to move it into the same directory in which my HTML file is. So, the benefit of having the image within the same directory as your HTML is that I can simply just get it by its name. So I can just type in image1.jpg. I can simply load the image by typing its name within the, quotation marks, image1.jpg. So whatever name it's here, you simply type it within here, but that's only if the image is within the same directory as your HTML file. So if I refresh this, there should be an image. You can see there's a very, very large image that is on the page. Now, if you want to reduce that, you can basically take another attribute, which is the width, right? So let's make it like 300 pixels. So if I refresh this, it will look a little less. Yeah, you can see it looks much nicer. It doesn't occupy way much more space than it needs to, right? Now, this is pretty easy. You can see that when it's in the same directory, that's pretty easy to load in. Now, what happens if I move this image into a different directory? So I'm going to move this image into the resources directory. You can see that first it's in the source code directory. Now I'm going to move it into the resources directory, right? So what do you think? Do you think that the image will load? Well, let's see. You can see that the image does not load anymore, right? Because now what this is saying is this is saying that, oh, it's basically looking for an image within the source code directory. But what we did is basically we set to the HTML, like we basically moved it to another directory. So in this case, it can be confusing, like, oh, how do I get the location of this image when it's located in some other directory? So you just wanna delete this and you wanna type in one thing. You wanna type in two dots, two dots. What two dots basically mean is I'll show you here, right? You are right now located where in the source code because that's where your HTML is, right? This is where your HTML is. When you basically type in two dots, so I've typed in two dots, right? What it's basically telling the HTML file is I want you, it's telling the HTML file, go back one directory back, right? Go one directory back. That means it's gonna go in to the HTML directory right now. Again, I'll explain it. When right now we are in the source code directory, when I write the double dots, two dots, it's gonna go back to the HTML directory, right? And from here we can navigate to whichever directory in which that image is consisting. So you will type slash and you can see that Visual Studio Code auto completes, right? So my image is located in resources and you can see image1.jpg. So if I go back and I refresh this, you can see the image is loaded, right? So that's how you basically can get an image that's located in some other directory, right? So yeah, and also, if you have the width property, you can also have the height property, like 200, let me say 150 pixels. Now you can, I will recommend that, if you're using the width property, do not use the height property. And if you're using the height property, don't use the width property, right? And the reason being is because you can see that it kind of looks stretched, right? It looks stretched in one way. So you want to basically use either width property or height property. We will discuss more about this in the CSS, but this is just to show you that it's kind of not good practice to show that, you shouldn't use these two properties together. So let me just refresh this, the width property, right?
Ayush, I just want to ask, can we use the absolute address in spite of using double dots and the resource slash image dot jpg?
When you say absolute address, what do you mean? Like,
Like directly from C directory, like the complete address of this particular image.
oh, okay, so you mean like the
Yeah,
complete
exactly.
okay,
Yeah.
so you know what, let's try. I haven't tried it till now, but let's see if it works. So you can see it does not work right here. Uh, I don't
Okay.
think you can I don't think I've ever used this in HTML because how HTML is working behind the scenes is it's basically operating from the current directory, right? It's not going to go back all the way to C to access the image, right? So it's important to understand that you are basically navigating from the current directory in which the HTML file is. So that's important to understand.
Thanks for
Uh, yeah.
clarifying.
So actually, I wanted to show you, like, if you don't want to use, let me show you another another way to load in the image rather than using the directory. Like, let's say this is a website called Unsplash, and in this website you get free royalty free images in which you can basically use images without any copyright. So let's say you wanted to use this image, right? Now, what you can do is, rather than downloading it and putting it in a directory and then, having all the hassle of, or whether it will load or not, you can simply copy the image address, right? And you can paste it in here. So this will load the image as well. You can see the image loads in fine, right? So there are two ways to load in an image. Either you can basically type in the URL, or you can basically, use the directory way that I showed you. So that is kind of all about the images part. Let's move on to something similar to images, which are basically anchor tags. Now, anchor tags are basically like the hyperlinks. If you've seen hyperlinks, like the hyperlinks, like these are the hyperlinks, right? The hyperlinks are basically, when you click on them, you will be like redirected to some other web page, or you will be redirected to some other website, right? So you usually use them in navigation bars, or you use them in footers, right? A lot. So the way you define anchor tags is a, and it basically takes another mandatory attribute. Like, how you had a mandatory attribute src in the image, you need to define a mandatory attribute in the anchor tag, which is referred to as href. Now, the href is very similar to the src, meaning that you will define the resource, like you will define the website URL, or you will define the, the HTML file that needs to be redirected to when you click on this hyperlink, right? So let's say, let me show you. Like, let's say you want to, when you click on that hyperlink, you want to go to Unsplash. So you basically paste in the URL. And remember, I told you that when I was talking about the syntax of HTML elements, I said that within the two opening tag and closing tag, there will be content. So you can write like go to Unsplash, right? So let's refresh this. So you can see that when I click here, it's going to redirect me to a website, the Unsplash, right? Now, another attribute that you can use with the anchor tag is target, right? And let me show you what the point of target and the value that it takes is blank, right? So let me show you what it does. You can see that before, when I was clicking on this, when I was clicking on this, before it was opening on the same web page. Let me show you. Without target, without target. So when I click this, you can see that it opens on the same web page, right? Without the attribute of target. When I added the attribute of target, let's go back. You can see that it opens in this separate web page. So this is a good user experience that you should consider when building your websites, right? So in href, I told you this is basically the resource or the website link that you want your user to be redirected to when you click on that hyperlink. That's it. It's similar to the src, the source attribute in the image element, right? So that's kind of all about anchor tags, right? And images. Let's move on to something like forms, right? So forms. Now,
Ayush, there is a one question in the chat box. I just want to read it for you. In the image source tag, the two dot will give us all the directory list, or it will give the two directories that are close to it.
yeah. So what the dot dot does is basically, if yeah, no. So right now you are in this, right? So when I say dot dot, what it basically means is it goes back one directory. It does not go back to the root directory. So if I'm in the source code directory and I say dot dot, it will go back one directory. That means it will go back to the HTML directory. So say you are now in the HTML directory and you say dot dot, it will go back to the directory of web dev sessions. So this is
Okay,
how it works.
Okay, let's suppose if I add four dots, then it will go back, directly to the web dev session from source directory.
I don't think it works with four dots. Four dots, like I think when you do two dots, you have to go back, and then I'm not sure if it works with four dots, but I know that once you are in this directory, in the HTML directory, you can further do two dots, and then you can go back to web dev sessions. But I don't think the syntax is four dots or six dots if you want to go back, keep going back to the directories, like the original directory.
Okay.
So yeah, so let's continue with forms right now. In forms, basically, forms is an interesting concept because this is kind of used in a lot of, like, the back end, when you're basically, like, if you go down the road of Node.js, you will use forms a lot. When you encounter like contact us page, those are, you write forms within the HTML. But the form tag is something like this. It basically takes in two attributes which are not mandatory, like one is action and the other is method, right? So the action is basically defines like when you submit the form, what should happen, right? That's what the form says. Like, when you submit a contact form in any website, you get redirected to some other web page, right? So that's what gets defined in the action. In the action, you basically define either a HTML file or a PHP file, which is a whole different concept. But this is basically defining what should happen when I submit the form, right? And this is a more advanced concept. Method basically, like, it basically takes a value of post, like you make a post request, and within Node.js you are able to basically access some information that the user submitted. Again, right now as a beginner, there's no need to for these two, right? So within the form, what it basically, there are several sub elements, right? There's what it takes is basically it takes a tag called an input tag. Now remember, there's many different types of input tags, like there's buttons, there's checkboxes, radio buttons, texts. So you can see that, oh, input, there's a input type text, input radio, right? Input like checkbox as well, right? So these are the different types of inputs that you can take. There's like so many more, right? You can explore by yourself. Like if you do input colon, you can see that there's a lot of inputs, and you can explore one by one, right? So if you go back to our website, you can see that our text box, you can see our radio button, you can see our checkbox as well, right? So now there's another tag that gets often used with each of these inputs, right? It's called the label tag. Now the label tag is basically used to indicate like what the input is there for. Like if I write what is your name, right? So that can be used like if I use another label like, oh, what, like, I don't know, yes, no, right? Something like that, or anything you want, right? Yes. So if you go back here, these is like the labels that get used, and these are basically associated with each of the text, like the inputs, right? So, and we also have one final important thing, which are buttons, right? So, like, when you like when you click submit, what should happen, right? So if I refresh this, you can see there's a submit button. Now, when I click this, watch what happens to the page. It was basically going to refresh, right? So watch what happens. You can see that it quickly refreshed, right? Now, normally what's supposed to happen is that when you click on this button, remember I told you about the action part? What happens is when you click submit, it's basically going to redirect you to whatever you have mentioned within this action, within these double quotes, right? So that's what the whole point of action is. Like when you submit the form, where should you be redirected to? So that's basically the purpose of action and the purpose of this button right here. So that's kind of all about forms, right? Let's discuss about, yeah. So you may be wondering like what this ID and name is, right? So right now, name is not important. Again, this is used in Node.js a lot, right? This is kind of used in order to access some information, right? This is like if you will, like if a user types in some, like if the user types in your name through the name property, you're basically able to get this piece of information. That's kind of it, right? As a front end developer, you don't really need this right now. What you do need is something called ID, which I'll talk about, right? I'll talk about ID and something called classes, right? Before moving on to IDs and classes, you may be like wondering, like I keep having to refresh the web page in order to see the changes. Like let me just change this, right? So I changed most important heading. So I changed this within the HTML. Now I keep having to refresh this in order to see the changes. Now let me show you a neat technique in which you can avoid doing that. So in your IDE, in your Visual Studio Code, you can basically go to extensions. So if you go to extensions, you go here, right? Now you can basically type in a extension called live server. So type in live server, and the first one that pops up, you want to install that, right? I've already installed it. Now you want to install that. Now what the live server does is basically if you go to your HTML file, now I want you to right click and you can basically see that there will be an option of open with live server. Now the whole purpose of this is I'll show you why this is so handy and why it saves so much time. I'm gonna change this back to first heading. Right, I'm gonna change this back to first heading. Now watch what happens to the web page in which I opened it with my live server. You can see that it automatically changed. Like I didn't even need to refresh it, right? You can see in the page in which it's not open with the live server, it's still the old one. I have to refresh it to see the changes, right? With the live server, basically, whatever code you write, it will automatically be updated. You don't have to refresh it or anything. So this is a very handy tool, the live server. You can see that you don't have to refresh it, and it saves so much time when you're building like large or long amount of projects. So that is something that will come in handy, I hope, when you're building your projects. Now, I want to talk about the, yeah, classes and IDs, right? Classes and IDs are basically two very important attributes that are basically defined within for each, they're basically defined for each attribute, right? You don't have to define them, but they are there for each attribute, classes and IDs. Now, classes are basically, a lot of people get confused between classes and IDs, right? Like, how do they, what's the difference between them?
Okay, so Ayush, sorry to interrupt you. Can you just repeat the live server implementation again for
Yeah,
folks?
of course. So in the left side part, you can see that there are several options, right? You have the Explorer, the Search, the Source Control, the Run and Debug, right? You want to go to Extensions, right? Just go to Extensions, and you in here, you want to type in Live Server, right? You want to click the first one that pops up, which is by this person here, Ritwik Day, and you simply want to install it, right? Once it's installed, you want to go back to your HTML file, right? Once you go to your HTML file, you want to you want to right click, and you will have an option of open with live server. Click on this, and you can see that it's open with live server, right? There will be like a port number that will be on the bottom right, and you that will tell you that you have opened it with your live server.
Thanks for the clarification. Folks, I just want to know that are we going fast or is it fine? Should we continue with the, can we record this session? Yeah, Razat, this session is under recording. Uh, Fine. So should we continue with the topic or this is fine for today? If you want to continue, just give a thumbs up in the chat box. We will continue with the session. Okay, just raise your hands if you want to continue with the session for today.
Is this video recorded or?
Yeah, this is under recording.
Okay.
25 plus. Fine for today. Okay, if you want, if folks want to continue with the session, please raise your hand, or else we will be winding up. Uh, Ayush, as per your schedule, do we can we how much time do we need more
I
to
just need
complete?
five minutes. That's it. It's
Okay,
just one
so let's.
concept. Yeah.
Okay, so please continue.
Yeah. So I just want to discuss one final thing, which is classes and IDs, right? So as I was saying, each element has two properties that it can have, right? Classes and IDs. So if I write class, and you can write ID. Now, what the class is basically like your name, right? So you can agree that in Sharda University, there can be more than one person with the same name, right? There may be more than one person with the name of Rahul. That's totally fine. So I want you to think of class as the name of the element. That means that two different elements, two same elements or two different elements can have the same class name, right? So if I give the class name of, I don't know, like first h1, right? I can also give the class name first h1 to this. There's no problem. I can give the same name to how many classes I want. There's not a problem at all, right? And like n number of elements can have the same class names, right? Because it's just think of it as somebody's name. Two people can have the same name. However, when you talk about ID, this is kind of like your system ID. This is like your roll number, right? This is unique to each element, right? That means that no two elements or no two or three elements can have the same ID, right? So if I give the ID of H1 to this, I cannot give the ID H1 to this, right? So you may be wondering like, oh, what happens? Is there an error or something? You can see that when I refresh this or it refreshed by itself that nothing happens actually. If you give two elements the same ID, nothing happens. There's no error, everything is working fine. But I just said that no two elements can have the same ID. The reason being I say that no two elements should have the same ID is because when you use CSS, when you use JavaScript, you're going to be accessing these elements, right? And when you access these elements, the browser would not know which one element to use because, okay, if the class name is the same, the browser knows, okay, it knows that, oh, these two have the same class name, I'm going to select both if they have the same class. However, when the IDs are the same, then it will get confused because it may select this, it will select this, and you will be thinking like, hang on, why is it not selecting this? It has the same ID. Now, this is why it's important that whenever you're using IDs, you should always avoid having the same name. Just never have the same name for them because it causes so much confusion when you're writing JavaScript and CSS. So that's why IDs should have different names. Classes can have the same name, right? So this is
Uh,
all.
Ayush, one more question just in the
Yep.
chat box. What is the significance of name and ID? I mean, what does a class do in the code?
Yeah, so this is the classes and IDs are basically used as selectors, right? So this will be very clear in the CSS sessions, right? So when you want to apply any style, like let's say you want to change the color of H1, you want to change the color of H2, you can basically select it using the class name, right? You can select it using its ID in order to apply that color, right? In order to apply that style. So that's kind of the main purpose of classes and IDs. You can select these elements and you can basically play around with them in JavaScript and CSS. That's the whole purpose.
Okay, so like ID and class are identifiers kind of thing.
Yeah, you can say that. As I said, like classes is like the name and ID is like your system ID, right? Your roll
Okay.
number. So it has to be unique. So that's, yeah.
Okay, so let's suppose I want to apply this same BG color. Let's suppose I want to apply some same effect to the H1 and H2. So I can use the class and I can apply that using
Yeah,
CSS.
yeah, because you have the same class name, you can apply the same background color on both of these, right? So
Okay,
that's the benefit of having the
okay,
same class name.
okay. So Ayush, I just got so much of feedback that we need to go a bit slow.
Okay.
So can you please just go back to meeting? I hope you have covered whatever you want to cover today.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, so just can you stop sharing? Let's have just a quick poll. All right, folks. So let me just change the layout. Just give me a second. Cool. So how many of you are thinking that we are going fast? Please raise your hands. Feel free for that. If you are thinking that we are going fast, just raise your hand. Hmm. All right. Uh, Ayush, I think we should. Yeah, Akshan Sonkar, we will be taking your question. Let's just complete this. Okay, so out of 70 students, there are 18 students who are thinking that we are going fast. All right, please uh, down your hands. Please down your hands. Millet, please down your hands. Sneha, please down your hand. Okay, how many of you are thinking that we are going in a fine phase? Okay, let me also raise my hands. Hmm. See, guys, if we will be going slow, we will not able to cover it in the six sessions. What we can do, we have to increase the hours. For example, now we are only running the session for 1 hour. We can increase this to 1 hour and 30 minutes, and we can go a bit slower. So if you agree with the point, just you raise your hand. From tomorrow onwards, we will have a session of 1 hour and 30 minutes. If you want that, we should go slow. If you don't agree, if you want to continue with the 1 hour session, please lower down your hand. I'm again saying if you want that, if you feel it is too far, then you can rewatch the recorded session. Okay, yeah. If you want that, we can cover the session in 1 hour and 30 minutes, and we should go a bit slow. Then please raise your hand. If you want that, we should continue with the phase of 1 hour. Then please lower down your hands. 2 hour. Okay, so there are around 25 students who want that we should cover it in a slow manner and in 1 hour and 30 minutes. Ayush, what's your take on this?
Anything is fine for me.
Hmm. 1 hour
स्लो
is
करने पे जल्दी खत्म नहीं हो पाएगा।
स्लो करेंगे तो उसको लेके फिर 1 hour 30 मिनट चलाएंगे।
सब कुछ तो
नहीं, स्लो में यूट्यूब पे भी लाइक HTML वगैरह का बेसिक्स वगैरह मिल जाते हैं, वो तो वहां से भी देख सकते हैं सब।
This is a very good point, Pranav. And okay, so I just want to okay, please, all of you, please lower down your hands, please, each and everyone. Just a quick poll for everyone. I request everyone to please lower down on your hands. Akash and Sushma, please lower down your hands. Ujjwal, you also.
यूट्यूब से देख के जिसको डाउट होगा वो सेशन में पूछ सकता है, एंड में 30 मिनट सेशन के डाउट के लिए रख दो।
This is a good
समझ तो
idea.
आना चाहिए तभी तो डाउट पूछे।
वीडियो
Okay.
में समझ में आएगा तो
Okay,
डाउट
cool,
सेशन
cool,
तभी तो मिल
guys,
रहा
guys,
है।
guys, cool,
समझ तो
cool,
आना
cool.
चाहिए।
Oh, cool. Okay. Okay, we will have a discussion on this. Just I want to know the feedback for today's session. If you are thinking that this session is rate this session 1 out from 5, in 5 star, like 1 to 5. If you are thinking this session was excellent, just write 5 in the chat box. If you can rate it in scale of 1 to 5. Ayush, you has I think today I become your fan seriously. Ayush, you have done a brilliant job. I'm a big fan of you now from now onwards. 4.5. See, Ayush, you can see your feedback for today's session. All right. So, coming to the next question. Oh my God. 10 points. Thank you. Okay. So, next question. If you want to learn from YouTube, then I can here. Okay. 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 Cool down, guys. We are thinking on it and we will be reducing the phase of session. But since we have a limited timeline and second year guys have, sorry, first year guys have their exams also, and Ayush is also, working on few projects, and I'm also, engaged, and many other folks are also engaged. So we really need to look after this. But okay, just give me a feedback on the speed on a scale of 1 to 5. If you think it is on a high phase, rate it 1. If you think it is fine, rate it 5. अगर लग रहा है कि जल्दी जा रहा है तो 1 स्टार रेट कर सकते हो, अगर लग रहा है कि ठीक जा रहा है तो 5 स्टार। 50 वैल्यू। Okay, okay. Can you give? Can we get a brief as opposed instead of boring professor? Can we get him as a course professor? Ayush, would you like to join Sharda University as a professor?
No.
See, Sharda is not giving him incentive as GDSC is giving. Okay, if you are feeling comfortable, you can open your cameras and let's just have a quick picture. And if you have any question, I request everyone to just open their cameras so that we can take a quick picture. And this will be going. I will be sharing this with the program manager of GDSC itself. Okay, folks, just stop typing in the chat box for a while, please. And trust me, we are doing our best. We are also recording this session. I hope if our techniques were working fine, if our technology was working fine, then you will be getting a recording of this session. Uh, I request everyone. There are 67 students, and I am on a layout of 30, and I am only seeing around how many faces? Uh, Not more than 10. Okay, let me change the layout. यार पोस्ट करने के लिए थोड़ा ठीक होना चाहिए ना, इसलिए लेआउट चेंज कर देते हैं.
सकल ये अच्छी तो क्या रखी?
नहीं, आई मीन बहुत लोगों ने कैमरा ऑन नहीं किया है, तो उसके लिए मैं थोड़ा सा लेआउट चेंज कर
भाई
दूं.
इतना सच नहीं बोलते.
Okay. Okay, there is a guy from some different country whose name was Daniel Kulomo. Sorry if I pronounced your name incorrect. How was the session, bro? Yo, Ayush. So he's the man behind today's session. Let's just take a screenshot. Thank you so much, guys. You can switch off your cameras. Thanks for your time. Okay, so Daniel, how was the session?
Oh no, that the session was very great. It was very great.
Okay, cool. Okay, so stage is your, Ayush. If anybody want to ask anything specific to Ayush, you can ask. You can clear your doubts, folks. Else you can leave. More announcement. One more announcement, folks. For tomorrow's session, I will be sharing the link in the group. You can register for the tomorrow session from the link itself, because it is compulsory to register so that we can track your progress, and also we can give you certificate. And I would like to add on that you can use these learnings to participate in the Technovation Hackathon, because this will be helping you to participate in the Technovation Hackathon. You can build your project, start building your projects. And yeah, Ayush is throughout your journey. Ayush will be helping throughout your entire journey.
हैकाथॉन के लिए टीम चाहिए.
यार ये इतना बड़ा ग्रुप बना दिया है, इतने सारे बच्चे ला दिए हैं, अभी भी बोल रहा है कि टीम चाहिए. उठा लो किसी को जो रेडी हो जाए.
ठीक है, उठा लूंगा.
जीडीएससी डिस्कशन में देख लो. Okay, if anybody want to ask anything, you can ask. Else, please leave the call. Yeah, Akash. Sure, please go ahead.
हैकाथन के अंदर सिर्फ खाली शारदा यूनिवर्सिटी के बच्चे पार्टिसिपेट कर सकते हैं या दूसरे भी कर सकते हैं?
दूसरे भी कर सकते हैं.
ओके.
Ayush, there is a question. What is the use of action in href tag?
Actually, there's no action. Action was actually used in the form tag. The href was being used in the anchor tag. The action and the href, they're basically two similar things, right? Action is basically used to define, like, when you submit a form, what should happen when I submit this form? Where should you be redirected to when you submit the form? That's what you get. That's what you define in the action. The href is basically used for some other HTML element, which is the anchor tag. Remember href, in which I showed you that the Unsplash website, that's what the href is used for.
Okay, one more question, Ayush. Like, are class and ID only the part of H1, H2, and header tags, or we can use them in the paragraph and list too?
I said these two are basically the two attributes that can be used with all HTML elements, right? So they can be used with paragraphs, forms, anything. Any HTML element can have class and IDs.
Okay, so folks, if you are uncomfortable in unmuting yourself, just write your questions in the chat box. I will be reading and Ayush will be answering them all. Okay, so the next question which comes, please tell duration of the overall campaign. So you can expect this campaign to wind up on WebDev will be getting wind up on the 5th of February. And if you want to cover up, if you want to join us for this deployment session, that will be going on 11 and 12. On 11th, I think Ayush, you will be covering this on cPanel, right?
Yeah.
Okay. On 12th, Akash will be covering how you can deploy this entire on cloud, Google Cloud. Okay. Class and ID can be used in all HTML tag. Yes, I want to use. Can you again tell the difference between target and source and anchor tag?
Yeah, so target and source basically they're the same thing, meaning that target is basically an attribute that gets, sorry, the source is basically a attribute that gets used in your image, right? So when you want to basically define the location of your image within the within the image tag, you want to use the source attribute, right? So remember I showed you the directory like double dots, and I also showed you the URL. So that's basically the source attribute within your image. Now the target is basically that's when you use it with your anchor tag. The target, remember I showed you that when I click on this hyperlink, it redirects you, when it opens up a new tab and then it redirects you. So in the target, I wrote something, a value called blank. Remember that? And that basically says that when I click on this hyperlink, it should open in a new tab. So that's all the target does. It basically says open in a new tab. If you don't define the attribute target, it basically means that when I click on that hyperlink, it's going to open on the same web page in where your website has been developed. So that's kind of the difference between target and source.
So any more questions? Or please leave because I have another meeting scheduled. I have to leave. Project will be given by you. No, you can make your own project, folks. You have to make your own projects, and we will be assessing it only. In fact, we will be not assessing it, but just we want that you should not copy it from GitHub, because Ayush is working really hard, and trust me, guys, he is the best person to learn web development from Sharda University. I will recommend if you want to learn web dev, there are only two people whom you should reach out to learn it very properly. One is Ayush in the student section. If you talk about the faculties, there then there is no one better than Sushant sir. Can you tell me more about the use of method and action? Uh,
So method and action are basically, the two attributes that were used in form, remember? So again, I don't want you to focus too much on method because it's used in backend applications, right? We are focusing on front end. So method is basically the type of requests that you make when you submit a form. So don't focus too much on it. When you're kind of dealing with backend, you will learn more about method. The action basically defines like what should happen when I submit this form, right? Within the action, you basically define either a index file, either a HTML file or a PHP file, right? So it basically defines, oh, when I submit this form, it should redirect me to this particular web page. So something like that. So that's the purpose of action.
okay, really enjoyed this class, sir. This is my first time. Thank you, sir. Ayush sir explained it from very basic wordings. Thank you, Ayush, for your kind words. And one more thing, guys. अरे यार इसके बारे में पहले बोलना चाहिए था. चलो. You all will be getting a feedback form maybe by 11 today. You, I request each one of you, please, 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 please fill that form because that's really important. From that form only we will get the data how we can improve the sessions. What are the things which you like and what are the things which you don't like. So it's my humble request. Please fill out those forms. And thank you so much for joining. Bye for now. Good night. Take care. More questions will be covered in the next session.
Thank you
Please
guys.
leave the class.
ये
थैंक यू
जैम
सर, गुड
आईडी
नाइट सर।
अभी तक ओपन नहीं हो रही है।
क्या ओपन नहीं हो रहा है?